Hi everybody, Julian here. Time to give you the thing you've been waiting for all week, Neill. There's a whole lovely session here. You're going to really enjoy it. At the end we've got the opportunity for you to buy the book, The Inside Out Revolution, which is a wonderful inspirational read. You'll love it. Also to join his Inside Out coaching program, which is also a fantastic way to study with Neill. And we're going to have some bonus material for you and some other stuff which will be really, really great. I hope you enjoy. So, ladies and gentlemen, Neill.
So, yeah, I'm really feeling very privileged now to be with you, talking to you right now, Michael, because and it came out of a moment where I got your book almost as the moment you came over to start to publicise it, and read it like a shot, wanted to reread it immediately, and I kind of loved it. It was really connected with it. And I'll do a little bit with, as my great-grandfather would have done, which is to start at the end, because the piece that really inspired me was the last chapters about enlightenment and how to live your life differently. And that's a piece that I personally hadn't heard from anybody else. So maybe you'd like to just, is that the space where miracles happen?
Well, for me, the space where miracles happen is what people start to discover when their thinking gets quieter. When they start to look in the direction of these principles that I talk about in the book. And it's almost everybody at some point falls into that space. And in the principles community we call it mind. But it's you could think of it as the state of meditation. But it's a natural space. It's not a, I'm going to get into this space and I'm going to get, you know, it's not, it's, you fall into it because it's actually home. It's your nature.
Okay.
Now, out of that space, it's possible to take a fresh look at life. And so the later chapters, sort of, I think of the book as being in 3 parts. I think it is literally in 3 parts, actually.
Yes.
But I think of it as being in 3 parts, where the first part is the foundation. It's the understanding of the principles and how our experience gets created. The middle part is sort of looking at, well, what are the implications of that for how we make sense of the world? And it talks a lot about wisdom and insight and grace. And then the third part is, what are the implications of that for how we might go live our lives? And I think the reason that you probably haven't seen the third part before is it's just my thoughts. It's not, you know, and I always think it's important to say, it's not, if you know these 3 principles, you will live like this. It's just, it's occurred to me, given what I understand about how life works, it makes a lot more sense to me to live like this. And I kind of hope I do a reasonable job of kind of making it non-prescriptive, where people don't think, oh, okay, so I've got to do this and I shouldn't do this. And you know, for me, this is a description of how life works. And then it's just an exploration of what that might suggest for what's possible, which is a lot more than people think.
Yeah, no, I think that piece, is it something you said about, a sentence that really struck me was, it's not the absence of thought, it's the presence of mind. And I really loved that, because I've been understanding the principles now for a little while, and you do tend to get focused on no thinking, less thinking. Thought becomes sort of this bad guy, and you're trying to conquer thought, like meditation, or, you know, and or even just, once I've got rid of this thinking, I'll be fine. And it just becomes stress reduction 101 then. It's not really at that level that different to a lot of other things. It's when what comes into that space, you know, the presence of mind, that energy and intelligence that we experience as wisdom and insight, that and well-being. I mean, that's what makes this so exciting and so different. And I understand when people read it, there are people, I love how many people have the experience you've had. Great.
And you know, people, you know, they're on their 3rd reading, their 4th reading, and for me, that's exciting. I understand the people who go, that's it? You know, because at first glance, it sounds like a bunch of other things. Oh yeah, meditation's good. Oh yeah, quiet mind. Yeah, that's good. You know, I've read about that. Whereas for me, what was so different about this was that it's really pointing to truth. And it's funny, I found myself, you know, we were at the conference today, and I found myself saying to a number of people who were going, well, you know, I kind of think I see it here, but I don't see it here. For me, this is either true or it isn't. If it's true, that changes everything. And in my experience, it absolutely is true. If it isn't true, if it's just another set of good ideas, even I'm not that interested.
Okay.
Right? The world's had good ideas for thousands of years. It doesn't need more of mine.
Right.
What's so surprising to me about this is the last thing I expected was to find something that was true.
Oh.
Right? I came out of an NLP background where, you know, it was all about the most useful lie. And I didn't use that word pejoratively. It's like, that's what we were trying to find. It's like, given that there is no truth, what's the most useful thing we can make up? And that was, look, it was better than getting stuck in one way of seeing.
Yeah.
But it left you kind of without much of a compass. And so, yes, you could absolutely reframe things. You could look at them different. You could think better. But then what?
Yeah.
And for me, when I first started to glimpse this, and I write about it a bit in the book, and so went, oh, wait, well-being is the default. Peace is the default. Connection is the default. That really messed me up in a good way.
Say a little bit more about that, because how do you know? How did you realise or know that it's a fundamental truth that we are innately healthy and we have innate well-being?
The funny thing is, I'm going to make up an answer for you, but the answer is I just did. I heard it, and I knew it was true. Now, I then thought about it. And when I thought about it, I thought, well, gee, babies are innately healthy, are innately well. You know, babies don't need therapy.
Yeah.
Right? And at some point, you know, even my kids when they were younger, you know, you could absolutely see, I tell the story of, you know, Maisie coming into the room, and I've got a client and saying, Daddy, you know, can I go play with the fairies? You know, and I said, sure. I mean, you know, after all, I'm not an ogre.
Right.
And you know, and that, and I turned to the client who was desperately kind of going, oh, I'd like to work on connecting. Can you help me connect? And I was going, do you think Maisie needs to work on connecting? And he was like, well, no, but she hasn't learned to cut herself off yet.
Right.
And see, I think intuitively we do get that we do that. That we're the ones who cut off from source. We're the ones who cut off from each other. We're the ones who take the reality of an individuation of a physical self and turn it into, I am separate, and you are separate, and enemy or friend, and all that game of life all comes from that fundamental cutting off that we forget that we did. That isn't natural. And I to me, the distinction between natural and normal is huge. Most of what I'm talking about isn't normal. It's normal to hate people. It's normal to feel separate. It's normal to feel isolated and alone and sad and all of that. But it isn't the design. It's just one of the things we can do with this amazing gift of thought. And when you see that, you're less inclined to do quite so much of it.
Right. I guess that's my experience of it, is that as you get more and more of an understanding, and it is a journey, isn't it? You do tend to see it more, see the thought more for what it is.
Yeah.
So, you just mentioned something really interesting, which was kind of like, we're talking about the journey of understanding and moving towards understanding that everything works this way. Tell me about that journey. How was that journey for you, Michael?
How was that journey for me? It was mostly lovely and sometimes icky. in that it's very different, because it's more like describing a journey down a river than a hiking trip. So there's not, like in a hiking trip, yes, there's the trail, but a lot of it's down to you. And in this, really all that's down to you is staying in the boat. You know, you do have to stay in the boat. Like, you do have to stay in the game. You do have to stay in the conversation. But other than that, it's an unfolding. So it's like the wisdom of mind, this deeper intelligence that's part of our nature, that unfolds it to you. but you do have to keep listening. So in a way, you're absolutely involved in the process, but there's just nothing to do. And that, for a long time, I kept trying to do something with it.
Okay.
Like, okay, well, how do I get this more? How do I get better at this? Or for the longest time, when I was first learning, it was like, well, how do I use this to create the miracles that you guys are creating? And it was, I actually went up to Le Connor, spent some time with George and Keith and Linda, and I went up absolutely with the intention, I'm going to model what they do. I'm going to NLP it. I'm going to figure out the strategies, the underlying beliefs, and I'm going to create the model and teach this therapy make it accessible to the masses, kind of thing. And when I came back from there, my friend who's doing NLP with me said, "Well, did you get it?" And I said to him, I said, "I'm so sorry, I drank the Kool-Aid." Because I just had seen something. And I didn't expect there to be anything to see. And that's what's so different is, people ask me now, why do you think this works so well? Why do you think this is so life-changing? And I say, because it's true. And you don't even have to be that good at pointing to the truth, because it's really there. As long as somebody looks, they'll see it. And in a way, our job, those of us who try to have this conversation with other people, is just to keep them in the conversation and keep them looking in that direction. When everything else in life is telling you, no, you need to look at your circumstances, you need to look at your habits, you need to look at your behavior, you need to look at the specifics of your thinking and change this thought for that thought. And to actually just keep going to people, no, you don't have to look at any of that. Look for what's true. Look for where your experience is coming from. Look for this deeper intelligence, this source. That's going to look for a feeling. That's going to carry you. That's going to give you everything that you need.
And how do those feelings guide you in that process? Are they the oar in your, are they steering oar in your canoe, or is there no steering to do?
Well, in the sense of the unfolding of the learning, I don't think there is any steering to do. You follow your nose, you follow your gut, you follow what interests you. Your wisdom will guide you on this journey. So you could say it's the oar, but I'm not convinced that it isn't also the river.
Okay.
I just think funny way, once you get past the idea that it's your job to figure it out, it's really a relaxing way to learn. Because there really isn't anything to do. And I no matter how many times I say that, I know, because I was there, I was like, okay, so step 1, don't do anything. Step 2, and then you want to know, well, how do I not do anything? And I think the other thing is people get confused when they hear that and they think, oh, so I'm not supposed to do anything. And they sit. And it's not a behavioral injunction. It's actually just a recognition of anything that you do to quiet the mind makes the mind noisy. I don't actually even know if this analogy is in the book, but I sometimes use the analogy of wisdom being like writing at the bottom of a swimming pool. So it'd be like the answer to your question is written at the bottom of the swimming pool. Now, if you dive in to try to find the answer, you're not going to see anything.
Right.
You actually have to kind of just stand by the pool, let the water settle, and then it's there. In fact, it's magnified by the water. And it's like that. When the mind gets reflective, when the mind gets still, the wisdom's already there. But, trying to do something to quiet the mind is like diving into the swimming pool to still the water. Okay. It doesn't work that way.
Okay. And so one of the things I really love about, two things that you said that I really love. One of them is that I've seen you talk about this before, and even today I'm getting the same sense from you, is like 100% absolute certainty that this is the truth. And that sense of trust seems to me to be hugely powerful.
I'm tempted to say it's everything. I don't know that I'm right. I don't know that it really is everything. But the trust, I always say to people when they say, well, it sounds like faith. Well, it's a kind of faith, but it's not a blind faith. Like, I have a certain amount of faith that the sun's going to come up in the morning. You could say I have certainty that the sun's going to come up in the morning.
Right.
Because it always has. Now, of course, it's possible one day it won't.
Yeah.
Well, I've got that same kind of faith that thought creates feeling, because it always does. I've got that same kind of faith that that deeper intelligence is available, because it always has been. Now, might one day my thought not create feeling and there not be a deeper wisdom? I suppose it's possible. But I have a certain degree of educated faith.
Right.
That the sun's going to come out tomorrow and I will have fresh thought and new ideas, and in the meantime my thoughts will create feelings and I will ride that as best I can.
And so what we're about at Stars of Wellbeing is to get this out to a wider and wider audience, the stuff that we do. And earlier you said about, you know, to get something out to the common man, as it were, not wishing to be denigrating because they're all great people. And how do you...
Well, we're all the common.
Exactly.
That's kind of the point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it seems to me at the moment that this is a fairly little known thing.
I was shocked because I had worked, I'd managed 2 bookshops in London, you know, a psychology bookshop and a New Age bookshop, so I'd read a lot of what was out there in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
I had studied, probably, I honestly think I had read as much or more than almost anybody in the field. And I had never, ever, ever come across this, even with my 20 years or so in the field. And so, yeah, they did an amazing job of keeping it a secret.
And how easy do you think it's going to be accessible to everybody in the world? I mean, your book does a great job of making it accessible.
It's going to be interesting to find out. I think what we're up against that's real is a culture that continually tells us, and has done for thousands of years, it's not a fault of modern life, that the world works from the outside in, that our feelings come from our circumstances, and that we're, to differing degrees depending on your culture, either that we're on our own, or there's a judgmental being who decides whether or not you're allowed to have well-being and things like that.
Right.
And then in the last couple hundred years, it's been, well, no, the well-being piece, that's psychology, that's the domain of the mind, and if your mother did this, or your father did this, or you did this, you're up against that. And, you know, the sort of psychological boogeymen. And so that's the only thing that we're up against in terms of people are used to thinking of it that way. What we have on our side, our secret weapon, is we're telling the truth. And so, like I say, it's a heck of a secret weapon. Because I know that if somebody really looks, they're really going to see it. Because it's there. Right? I forget who I first heard this analogy from. I think it was Sandy Crott. A great analogy about bird watching. And she said, if there's a bird in the tree, and I want you to see it, all I have to do is keep pointing, and at some point it's pretty inevitable you're going to see it.
Sure.
And for me, this is like this. There is a bird in the tree. There is a truth behind the human experience. And if enough of us point to it in enough different ways, people will see it. And it doesn't matter that everyone else is going, there's no bird in the tree. Don't look at that tree. Look over there. It's innocent. I mean, nobody's trying to stop you from looking. But they really don't think there's a bird in the tree. They really think, oh, that's a waste. I looked for that bird once. It's not there.
Yep.
You know, the blue bird of happiness. You know, it's you know, the best you can get is this.
Yep.
And it's, you know, even that idea is not new. Plato's cave. Right? That was, you know, Socrates' analogy. Was everyone's looking at the shadows and trying to make sense of life based on a reflection, an image. And if they would turn the other way, they would experience freedom.
So it's back to that separateness you were talking about earlier. That's the kind of the illusion, I think, is what you're saying. Am I putting words in your mouth to say that?
Yeah, but I like them.
Oh, good.
No, I mean, I think there is a oneness to life from what I can tell, and from what the physicists say, and from what the mystics say. I mean, nobody really disagrees about that. I find that interesting. I used to think that when I was first learning about this, you know, this is spiritual. I can only talk to certain people about this. I found myself to be wrong again and again and again about that. I have really yet to talk to. I've talked to one person, literally, who couldn't see at least some of this, and they were so violently against anything that even sounded like it. And I wonder now if maybe I could talk to them about it, because I see it more clearly.
Okay.
You know, so I mean, you know, atheists, Jehovah's Witnesses, Jewish people, Muslims, Christians, I mean, Hindus. I mean, I've literally, you know, I've taught people personally from over 30 countries, and from, I've not counted religions, but every religion I've come across, including atheism. And nobody doesn't accept, at least at the basic element, that we're not in charge, that we're not the predominant creative force in the universe. And just seeing that that actually matters, and seeing that thought is that missing link, that thought is the thing that creates experience, it changes people's lives to see that. And in a really gentle way, usually. Sometimes like a slap in the face, but usually really gently. People just start to feel better. And things that seemed like, when I was first learning, I do tell this story in the book, you know, I was experiencing results with clients, and I've been working with NLP for 15 years, very successfully. Yeah. But I was getting results in my private practice I had never dreamt of. And I went to one of my mentors and I said, I don't get it. I'm not doing anything. I'm just talking to people about these principles, about the inside-out nature of experience. Why would that make these lifelong problems or 20-year problems disappear? And I loved her answer. She said, because they were never really there in the first place. So it's a different kind of a magic trick to make a shadow disappear than to make an actual solid object disappear. And our problems look like solid objects, but they turn out to be shadows.
The illusion.
The illusion.
Cool.
Yeah.
And the other thing that comes out of that for me, and maybe you can talk to this, is there seems to be a huge sense of hopefulness that comes out of the principles.
I don't know if you've read the Lord of the Rings books.
Yeah.
But one of the things I love in the Lord of the Rings books is that evil is personified in the books by a loss of hope. So what the forces of evil do is they take away hope. And good, white magic, is giving hope.
Yeah.
And I think that there is a lot of white magic here, in the sense that there's something incredibly hopeful about realizing we're part of this infinite potential. We're one thought away from well-being, no matter what we've been through, no matter what we're going through. We're one thought away. That's incredible to me, and it makes it a lot easier to sit with somebody who doesn't get it, and who doesn't get it, and who doesn't get it, and say it for the 19th time. It makes it easier for me to say, read the book again. Read one of Sid Banks's books again. Because I don't know what's going to trigger it. I mean, to be honest, they might have just as much luck driving behind a beer truck, right? Because what they're going to see is going to come up from inside them.
Yep.
But when they see it, it's done. That bit's done. And then there's more to see, and then there's more to see.
Right, so it's never there's never a binary answer, is there? There's kind of, you see it a bit more clearly and then a bit more clearly.
Yeah, and sometimes you have these huge leaps in consciousness and you suddenly get a whole bunch of stuff clear. And more often than not, it's like, oh yeah, this bit's a bit, I get this a bit more, I see this a bit more, oh that was a cute insight. And then I was saying at the conference, I think, you get the two big ones, which are the Charlton Heston, oh my God, insights, and then you get the Homer Simpson, I think it was Keith Blevins used to call it flathead therapy, because you're coming in and you're like, oh, but they're both great. I remember saying in a talk, I think it was last year at the conference, how you can explain all human behavior in two phrases. And why does anyone do anything? Because it seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sure.
And for me, what shows that people intuitively sense the truth of thought as the creative force is that when you look back and you feel like an idiot for what you were doing, you always say, what was I thinking? And we recognize, yeah, it seemed real in our thoughts. I mean, that's, I don't know, would it be okay if I go into a little bit the principles? Because I just think, if you haven't read the book yet, then what am I talking about?
A lot of these people won't have, so
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, for God's sake, go out and get it.
Yeah,
but,
I agree.
In the meantime, there's really two things. So we talk about three principles, and the fundamental principle, there's no real sequence to them. They're kind of all the same, very different, like three different angles on the same thing.
Yeah.
But is what we call the principle of mind, what I call in the book the God principle. And it's just that there is a universal intelligent energy behind life. That's as far as you need to go with it. You don't need to decide what it is, where it comes from. There is an energy, an unfolding that we are a part of, that was working before we showed up and will continue to work after we go. And we can see it in our body. We can see the intelligence behind the body. We can see it in nature, the incredible intelligence behind nature. We tend not to notice that it's behind the mind, and it shows up in the mind as wisdom. And we tend not to notice that it's behind all life.
I think I could give you some examples of where, for example, with my first child, the daughter, we tried for years to have a child, and then the moment we gave up was when we conceived her. And to me, that was that there's something bigger than me, and I should trust to that some more.
Yeah.
Looking back on it, it seems obvious.
Well, or at the very least, you may as well do.
Yeah.
Because your best efforts, have gotten you where you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think there's a lot of comfort and peace in being able to rely on that, to realize that's like an invisible safety net. You really can rely on that. Consciousness, the capacity to experience life, right? We take that as a given. I mean, it seems so, well, of course I can experience life. Well, why? Why do we get to experience life? I don't know, but that's a gift. That is a capacity. I talk about it sometimes like the developing fluid for film. It's the boiling water that you put the tea bag in.
Okay.
It's the shining light that you put film in front of. In and of itself, it isn't anything. It's just pure white light. It's just pure clear water. But as soon as you put something in it, it brings it to life. And so what it brings to life is thought. So thought would be the film, thought would be the tea bag, thought would be, whatever it is that comes to life. Yeah. And that's any life experience that you're having is being created from the inside out via these three principles. The energy and intelligence of life is kind of powering the system, and then thought and consciousness create our experience. And that's it. And it turns out that seeing that is hugely, it seems like no big deal. Yeah, okay. Most people don't really even argue with that. They go, yeah, I see the logic of that. But what they don't see, I mean, I have a test, which I can't use the language that I would normally use for it.
Sure.
But I'll call it the, what should I translate it to? The holy freaking mother of God test. Let's call it that. Which is that if somebody hears this and doesn't go, holy freaking mother of God, they haven't really got it. Because seeing the logic of it and feeling the impact of it are two very different things. There is a logic to it, and I think it's powerful to see that there's a logic to it. But when you actually start to glimpse, oh my gosh, it's all made up. I've been making it all up.
Right.
And then reacting to it as if it's real and trying to fix it as if it's real. Or I've been trying to do it all myself, and I've been trying to work it out, and all the time, the while, there's this. I don't think this analogy made the book, but sometimes use the analogy of walking along a path with a huge giant behind you, and there's this big boulder blocking the path. So what most of us do is we using our strength or we'll use our intellect, we'll use leverage. So we'll get a lever and we'll move the rock, and we'll manage to move the rock like this much, but just enough. We squeeze through, and we have such a sense of accomplishment and ego and heroism. All we actually needed to do was ask the giant to do that. And that's this incredible resource of mind that's always available to us. But we forget, or we don't know, or we haven't made use of it enough. We haven't seen it enough to rely on it. And once we start to rely on it more and more, life gets so much more effortless. Because we're not trying to do things that are being done already. You know, the thought-feeling piece. When I start to see, oh my gosh, this is all made up. I mean, I remember for me, one of the first ones I saw was we got invited to a Grammys party. I live in Hollywood.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, I'm shy, you see.
I can't believe that.
Well, I could, right? I did for years and years and years. And I thought it was a real effort. I could get up on stage and prance about, but boy, then I needed to go hide, right? Because I was shy. And I even said to my publisher after my first book, I said, you put any microphone in front of me and I'll talk to it, but I will not go to a book launch party because I'm shy, right? Well, it suddenly dawned on me. I'd been studying the principles, and I thought, it's a funny idea. I wonder, what if I wasn't shy? Like, surely that's just an idea. That's just thought. And I went to the Grammys party and I had a great time because I wasn't sitting there going to the party fighting against this reality of shyness. And and it was sort of a shock, and I started seeing that everywhere, that it's all made up. Now, I'm not saying you can go in and will yourself out of it, because as long as it looks real to you, if you think, well, I'm really shy, so what do I need to think to not be shy? It wasn't that. It was, I just saw that, well, that's made up. I'm not shy. Sometimes I act shy, sometimes I don't. But once I make up the identity of shy, I then discount all the times where I'm not shy. Right. I don't know what that was. That was a no. Really, trust me, I'm shy.
I must have had something to drink.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's the other thing we do. We attribute it to something outside ourselves. And that's the only reason I stopped doing techniques with people, is because I saw that even the slightest technique was like, it's like if you and I know that our kids can naturally float, right? I'm not saying do this at home, kids, but we might throw them in the pool, knowing we're there, but knowing that they're going to actually rise to the surface. If we put even one thing for them to grab onto in the pool, they're going to grab onto it. Yeah. And that's the problem. If you give people well, maybe it's this great technique, or maybe it's me, maybe it's just hanging out with me that lets you feel this good. Maybe it's the drink, maybe it's the food, maybe it's the drug, maybe it's the sex, maybe it's whatever it is, they will grab onto it.
My kids were exactly like what you described. Yeah. My son would just run to the side, jump in and start kicking. Yeah. He'd be gone. My daughter would climb down the ladder, hold onto the side for grim death. The side was safe. Yeah. And she didn't realise that she'd forgotten that she could float, naturally float.
Yeah, and that's why it's really interesting. Certainly in the States, they teach babies to swim, because a baby doesn't yet have the thought that they can't. And they've got this amazing videos of these kids under the age of 1 swimming, and it's actually considered a safety issue that it's if you can show them that early.
I just remember all the other parents around the pool. The moment my son dived in, would be going, "What's he doing?" It's like, no, he's fine. He'll be fine.
And I think that's the other misnomers. I think if you've, and I'm going to assume that a lot of people in Stars of Wellbeing have spent a lot of time studying personal development or self-help in one form or another.
Right.
And one of the things that makes that problematic, and boy, I'm talking from personal experience, is that it really looks like that's helped. Okay, it hasn't helped as much as I'd hoped, it hasn't helped as much as I want, but I'm on to something. And so for people like us to come along now and go, actually, that's getting in the way. The idea that you need to remember this, practice this, do this, that's actually what's slowing you down. It sounds oxymoronic, and like, well, that can't be true. I know better. But what happens, and it happens every time, is when you do experience a breakthrough, when you do experience a huge insight, it's because you let go of the old thought for a moment. For me, one of the reasons that I studied and practiced NLP for so long, and learned a lot and had an amazing experience. And I know that a lot of people have been helped by that work. But it came from one insight where I was reading a book and it said, turn down the volume on the voice inside your head. And it got quiet. And I felt well-being for the first time in my adult life. As it, I've been a depressed, suicidal teen. And because I thought it was the NLP, I threw myself in. I became, a leading trainer, a leading practitioner, because it really looked to me like that's what had done it. Boy, that technique did it. What other techniques can I learn?
Okay.
What other techniques can I do? There's a comedy to me that if that happened to me now, and I recognized that that was just my natural state of well-being, I don't know what I would have done for those 15 years, but I would have had more free time.
But do you find that, so you, coming back to your journey, do you find that there was, you talk about when you let go of the thought, did you have resistance? Did you find it difficult to let go? Because you obviously were a very successful, have been and are a very successful coach.
Honestly, no, because there wasn't anything left to hold on to. Like I had thinking about it. I mean, I was about to go on a book tour, promoting a book, telling people about how to use their thoughts to create well-being. But I just saw, but it doesn't work that way. And so I couldn't keep teaching that. It's not harmful, I don't think, that people think that. And I've gotten, look, I know that book has saved lives. I've gotten emails and letters from people. And I also know that idea that I needed to do it, that if I didn't take my behavioral Prozac, as I called it, every day, I was 2 weeks away from black depression and suicide. Now I wasn't, funnily enough, I wasn't that worried about it because I knew I wouldn't stop taking it.
Right.
I knew I wouldn't stop practicing. But it was kind of wild when I suddenly saw I didn't have to, and that there was actually something that would pick me up. And I just had never let go long enough for it to come into play. I always remember this. I haven't used this analogy in this context, but years ago, Neill and I have been together 25 years now, and in the first few years, we had the usual teething issues of a couple. And one was that I never cleaned, and that I didn't care about the house, and I thought she was probably right. I wasn't proud of it, but I never seemed to want to clean. And then she went away for a few years in, for the first time where she went away for a week, and about 3 days in, I kind of noticed myself cleaning the house. I thought, oh, and she'd never left it more than a day. So it had never gotten to the point where it occurred to me that it needed cleaning.
Right.
Well, in a funny way, it's the same thing. If we've learned to be on our thoughts, on our moods, ooh, okay, what are my moods? And I gotta control it. The reason you don't recognize that there's a self-correcting mechanism is because you've never left it alone long enough to self-correct. Now that's not everybody's experience, but a lot of people who spent a lot of time in self-help, that's what I see. And they have had maybe a time in their past where they got caught up in thought, they got depressed, or they got anxious and had anxiety attacks, and they're so worried about that happening again that they've been on it ever since. And I wouldn't say to somebody, you should let it go, because that sounds irresponsible. But what I can tell you, what I can tell anyone is, as you start to see how this works, as you start to see that you're only ever living in the feeling of your thinking, you will wind up letting it go at some point, because it just won't make sense to hang on to it.
And different people do it at different, everybody does it differently, different speeds, different ways.
Yeah, I like the analogy, can't remember who had it today, somebody in the conference today used the analogy of popcorn.
Huh.
That learning the principles is like applying heat to popcorn.
Okay.
Not every kernel pops at the same. Some pop really early, some pop really late, some don't pop till you take it off the stove. Some don't seem to pop until the next time you put them in. And so it has its own timing. But if I know that the nature of the kernel is a popped piece of corn,
Yeah.
it's easy to keep going. You know, even if every now and again I go, why won't this one pop?
So there's lots of things that I get from what you've been saying.
Yeah.
First of all, I find your complete trust in the principles is very disarming and really encouraging, which is lovely, and that leads to the second thing, which is this wonderful sense of hopefulness, because as you know, you're just talking about, I was 2 weeks, fancy having the threat of I'm always 2 weeks away from black depression over you. I think that's a horrible place to be, whereas now
but see, at the time I was quite proud of it. 2 weeks, it's a long time.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
you know, and that was the thing, is there was never any pretense behind it. I thought that was as good as it could get. I honest to God, if you had told me, you know, the day will come where the idea of you being a depressive will seem funny to you, that wasn't even on the menu as far as I was concerned. And I think that's one of the things, is that there's a whole lot of stuff that's on the menu that we don't know is on the menu. And that's where the hope is. There's a whole lot. It can be so much easier, so much richer, so much better than you can imagine.
And that's incredibly and that's incredibly freeing, isn't it? I mean, the sense of freedom you get from that is enormous.
Yeah, and for me, I would say the key to this understanding is that it's about freedom, not control. So much of what we look to is, how can I get more control over my feelings? How can I get more control over my life? How can I get more control over my relationships? This is about freedom. The freedom to feel great or feel bad and it be fine. The freedom to have things work your way or not work your way and it to be great.
Yeah.
And freedom, we're so not used to freedom.
Right. It almost seems to be the modern default to be in control, to have a plan, to have goals and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And this speaks to a much more natural...
Control is such a poor substitute for freedom. It's better than no control, but it's nothing compared to freedom.
And what do you think would tip the balance for people to leave their, you know, modern day complex control life, which they feel as, you know, they paid the price for it maybe, but they feel as success, to moving into this kind of...
The only thing is insight. Like the only thing that... Because if you try to will yourself into this understanding, that's just control again.
Right.
It's if something that you hear in this interview, right, if something that somebody reads in the book touches them, sparks just a glimmer of an insight, that's all it takes. And then if they look deeper, there's more to see.
So just the tiniest movement, and you're on your way.
And you're on your way. And it, you know, for some people it's just, I don't know why, I just feel better after that. You know, I already, there are people carrying the book around. I said, I don't know why, but I just feel better. Well, it isn't the book. It's that what the book is pointing to has allowed their natural well-being to come up to the surface. And like, well, it must be the book. Well, it's not even the book. I mean, the book can be a useful pointer,
right,
but what it's pointing to is already there.
So people are doing it, but the book can naturally, people do it naturally, everybody. But the book can give them an understanding of the principles, can give them...
I mean, you know, what I like to, the way I like to think of it is, what the book is showing is what's already happening that you're probably not noticing. That once you start to notice it, will change your relationship with life.
So, the big reason for doing this was to promote your book, because I thought it was so wonderful that everybody should know about it. And
thank you.
But that's what we're here to do. But what else can they do with Michael Neill to?
Well, so we've created an online program to go with the book. It's called Living from the Inside Out.
Okay.
And so that's a series of video lessons with me where I go into more depth with the ideas in the book. And then there's an online community and there's monthly calls with me. So people can do that online. They can find it at, I don't know if we can, you want to include links or how you want to do it.
There'll be a link on the page.
But so people can do that. For people who want to train in this, there's Coaching from the Inside Out, which is an online program. And then there's also, you know, if you're really in, come on a retreat. We do Learning How to Thrive retreats three times a year. Come on Super Coach Academy if you want to learn to do this work. Come work with me.
Okay.
I do intensives, I work with private clients. I've got a fairly full schedule, but if you get on the calendar now, at some point, that day will show up.
Okay. Well, it's been wonderful to talk to you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
And I hope that everybody's going to either buy the book or click on the link and start the Inside Out program and really start to make that little bit of difference that's going to take them on a fantastic journey to freedom. So, all right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Really good.
Pleasure.
Excellent.